Let me just see if Milind Kothari is also with us on the line. Milind, good morning. Let me understand this from your point of view as well, in terms of the kind of impact that you see of this when it comes to the companies that have already had investments, perhaps, for instance, FCCBs or other instruments that would need to be converted well before the 2017 deadline to avoid tax.
So that's quite right. Good morning to you, Baya.
Yeah.
And I think this is the great news that we have in the tax domain in the longest time. And obviously, there is a time period up to 2017 that this amendment is not going to impact the investments, which is great news because existing investments are not impacted. Only the investments that are made after 1st of April of 2017 would get impacted in the process. And again, for a staggered period of 2 years and thereafter, it will be exposed to the full tax rate. But I think the biggest win over here is the clarity in the law that is now available to investors. And I can't seem to think that any investor aspires that they don't want to pay tax in a country where they make investment. That being said, I think this is most welcome that there's a clarity here, and I think I do agree that this would really mean that the investment should come back into India, which all of that was suffering on account of not having a clarity on the tax system in India or how they would interpret the India-Mauritius treaty. So this is super news.
Milind, in fact, that's what we were discussing, that the certainty is great, the clarity is great, but I just want to understand from an investor point of view, and also, in terms of some of the corporates or the funds that you may interact with, what impact will this have on other instruments that perhaps will require conversion, restructuring, and so forth? Perhaps FCCBs or other routes, even P-note issuances, instruments where perhaps there wasn't any intent to perhaps convert before that 2017 deadline.
Yes, well, of course, if you convert the instrument after that date, that would mean that there is an acquisition of a new capital asset post that period of time, and then again they would get impacted. So, having said that, existing instruments of debt which get converted into equity at a later point of time, after 1st of April 2070 would get impacted to the extent there are taxable conversion.
Milind, good morning. Just to get a little clarification on what happens if I was a US fund. If I was, US of course has a worldwide taxation. So let's say I had invested in India through Mauritius, or I was a foreign personal holding company out in the US. Even if I didn't pay any tax in India, wouldn't it all get taxed in the US? And if I paid some tax in India, wouldn't I get a foreign tax credit in the US? I'm just trying to understand how worldwide taxation works against us.
So a good point, actually. It's only that when you want to keep the money into Mauritius and then use it for further investment or any other country for that matter, that's how that would have really made a difference, that you don't end up paying tax in India and you benefit from not having to pay tax in India. But to your point, if the investment were to come from the US and then you probably adopted it through Mauritius, you would have got a benefit of the double taxation and then you would have got a tax credit back in your home country. So that would have remained that remains intact, if I put it that way, post this amendment, in case you end up paying tax in India. But the very fact that then there is no motivation for you to route an investment through Mauritius if you are a US investor, because then you might as well invest directly into India. If finally there is a tax to be paid in the US and you want to claim a credit in the US of the Indian tax that you paid, you could have very well achieved that with a direct investment in India. So Mauritius will lose its relevance in a period of time, because anyways it was a route that was being used for not having to pay tax in India on capital gains. That being said, you could rather make an investment directly into India from your home country and claim the tax credit in your home jurisdiction. That would be a more sensible approach to take.
Milind, my own experience with taxation is that there is a law, and then there's the tax officer who just makes his own interpretations about everything, which means he can take the premium on a stock and say all of it is income. I mean, all kinds of stuff they do. My question here is, does this then make it very clear that, look, that's all the tax is, you cannot do anything else? And is it possible that in the interim, when we didn't have the clarity, tax officers were making all kinds of interpretations and even going ahead and taxing sometimes when they were not supposed to?
I quite agree with you, because when you have a black hole of a tax law which is there, where there is an ambiguity in interpretation, and despite Supreme Court saying at a point of time that India-Mauritius treaty need to be respected, the tax officers, the tax department never agreed to that point of view, and therefore they went ahead and made their own interpretation of how tax was to be administered. which brought discretion on the table from the perspective of the tax officer, which all of us are privy to, and we understand very well what really happened and what did not go well. But with this clarity in law, I can't seem to think there will be any option for a discretionary interpretation of the statute. And I would say that this is the finality on the subject. If this is the way things are going to be in the future, we're probably seeing the end of the discussion about the Mauritius route and the taxation controversies that surround it.
Okay, we've got Seth Freeman also with us. Seth, the big question, and just taking off from where we left with Milind a moment ago, how is this going to impact sentiment when it comes to investing in India, if at all? If you don't think it is, that's great as well. But there are some that complain that, as Ashu was just discussing, that nowhere else in the world do we see taxes on these kind of transactions. Is it going to impact investors looking to get into the market here, or they're going to want to come in anyway, so it's just that it's a bit more clarity and things will actually just be fine? All right, we'll try and get Seth on the phone line because I think that Skype link is a little bit dodgy this morning, so we'll try and reconnect with him there, and if we could get him on the phone line, please. But Milind, just to come back to you, and I'll put the same question to you. In terms of sentiment, and at least a knee-jerk initial reaction, even though, as we've been discussing, there is further clarity, it's a staggered approach, do you see this having an impact? Do you see this as being a deterrent to fund flows coming into India?
No, so I would clearly not agree that this is a deterrent of any sort for investment coming into India. In fact, I would say this is the most positive thing that you could expect. If India has a reasonable tax regime and wants to tax gains, which is in line with what would you expect anywhere else in the world as far as the tax rate is concerned, if one earns income, I don't think anyone has a problem of not paying tax on that. And I don't think that's the aspiration of any investor, that they want to invest in a country simply because they don't need to pay tax in that country. I don't think that's how investments are driven. That being said, I think the most important thing after earning an income is that you want a clarity of law. And if a clarity of law is there, actually it spurs investment. So I would clearly not think this is a deterrent for investment. If there's a short-term reaction to this news, I think that's probably going to die down very soon because it's done in a very, sensible manner. There's a staggered approach taken over here. And there is also a period of 2 years after the introduction. There is a 50% rebate on the tax rate you need to pay. All said and good, I think this is going to work very well for the investor community.
Milind, just to seek further clarification, my first point was that this really applies only to short-term capital gains. This doesn't apply to long-term capital gains. So in a way, the quality of the fund flows should actually improve. And my second question to you, just following up on my US question, since most investors originate from there, the US doesn't really care what jurisdiction you use. I mean, they go after the ultimate beneficiary. So technically speaking, India's gain will only mean a foreign tax credit in many countries, and that's all. And most taxpayers will, at the end of the day, just be equalized, and nothing else will happen.
So that's quite right. If you're able to get...
Okay, I think we'll just go back. Yeah.
Well, a couple of other tweets coming in, Ashu, and we'll get back to Milind also in just a moment. For instance, Samir Arora also reacting to this, and essentially, while he is against the whole